Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for a session on foster experiences with orchestration. My name is Nathan Langton. I am Ping Identity Product Manager for our orchestration strategy, our roadmap, and our vision. And I've been with Ping about 10 years now.
My name is DaSilva. I'm also with Ping with the professional services team. I've been with Ping 12 years or so now.
Perfect. So let's get started. So in today's session, we'll cover a little bit of an overview of identity orchestration. We'll talk about why experience matters, why it's so important to us, a little bit of the benefits of orchestration, and then we'll transition to a demo of building a user experience that John will take us through that also includes form building, branding, and language support. But to start things off, I want to show you up front just an example experience that I built within about 5 or so minutes just by Googling some content. And just to illustrate the kind of experiences that you are able to build in a rapid way. This by no means is a perfect experience, so don't judge me. It's just an example. In this experience, I'm just going to hit play. There we go. In this experience, now that everyone's traveling again, I've built this fictitious travel site called Oceanic Airlines. You can see I've got some branding, a logo, background colors. I've got a registration form or registration process that I'm now rendering on the screen using our orchestration tool. And you can see the branding, the color schema, the logo, all with the form layout, all being rendered on the screen. These forms have an email, password, first name, last name, nothing special about that. And then the subsequent screen has an email verification form. Now this is a very simple example, nothing to it really. But really when it comes to, and then I forgot. Now I'm changing it to a Safari travel site. You know, I'm looking forward to my next Safari trip to South Africa. All I did is I changed the branding. I hit play again within our orchestration tool, and you can see the same form rendered with different branding, different schema. So a pretty cool experience, pretty cool demonstration of how branding gets overlaid with form building. But there's a lot that goes into building something like this within your organizations. You know, this was just something quick and dirty. I Googled some images, put them together. But there's the personalization that you got to build into it. There's your branding, your themes, your color schema, your layout, your form building. There's the security aspects to your forms. There's the usability aspects. Presenting enough information that captures what you need, but doesn't turn people off and contributing to drop off. And then there's the localization, part of the personalization, where you want to meet your customers where they're at in their language of choice to increase engagement. So a lot that goes into it. And this is why building great experiences matter. It matters because your brand is personal. Your brand reflects your company. It also can add frustration when it's meant to remove friction, yet increase security. There was a McKinsey study that was done that said companies that excel in personalization achieved or generate 40% more revenue than equivalent companies that don't. So it matters a lot to your brand. A few stats, and these are kind of scary stats. 16% of the time consumers have a negative experience with organizations. I'm sure you guys, even on this trip, may have encountered a negative experience with the check-in process or verification process of an airline or whatever it may be. Or like a cart experience in checking out your merchandise. Up to 50% of customers reduce spending with a brand after poor experience. There was a separate study done by PricewaterhouseCoopers that said 30% of customers that were loyal to a brand. So we're talking about loyal customers, not just any customer, would leave that brand after one negative experience. These are kind of scary stats, especially if you're in the SIAM space, right? And then the impact to your revenue, that puts your revenue at risk due to lost revenue when it comes to poor or bad experiences. Thanks. So there's a lot to it. And you know, this slide has been spoken to a number of times in this conference already. You guys know the pendulum traditionally between security and usability experience, and you know, generally in the past it's like you can get better experiences, but it's you know, less security, vice versa. But customers expect both. They expect both a high degree of security and a high degree of usability for their customer base. It's no longer a choice. And on top of that, they want speed to the market. They want to get their things out in a rapid session. Andre, in his keynote speech yesterday, kind of alluded to this when he talked about our Ping Identity's vision around orchestration and how it helps with speed to the market. One of the factors of why we're investing in that. So how does orchestration help you? Well, it helps solve the integration complexity issues that we have today. It's one of the main driving factors of using any orchestration tools. You know, companies use an average of 976 applications, and only a subset of those are ever integrated. And there's a lost value in those others that aren't integrated. They're not being utilized in the way that they should. Not only that, we know this in the identity space, just going into the expo hall, of how many niche players there are in the identity space. You know, they talked yesterday about consolidation. We haven't seen that yet. There's still a lot of vendors in the space and niche players, and it's how do I integrate with some of these vendors but avoid the lock-in problem. Being able to be flexible and switching them out or playing with multiple vendors at the same time. Also, it's about overcoming technology and resource limitations. You know, I've learned that just because you have you're part of a big organization doesn't mean you have developers on hand at any time you want for an identity-related project. Oftentimes, those requests are many quarters in advance, and you know, when you want to do simple things like change simple experiences in your branding or in your experience, like a registration or authentication experience, it requires these dev resources, because a lot of times our legacy systems have they're legacy systems, they're hard-coded, which speaks to job security to for some folks. But it's hard to be agile in that environment. It's hard to make changes. And this is where orchestration can help abstract some of that complexity around hard coding and vendor lock-in. Lastly, it's about also gaining visibility into your user experiences. So not just the ability to build visually appealing flows that reflect your experience that you want to offer your employees or your customers, but it's being able to test them in a rapid way, deploy them in a rapid way, and optimize based on metrics. And it's going through that whole accelerated life cycle, being able to do that in an easy way. And our traditional IAM tools aren't conducive to some of these things. And this is where I'm very excited about the kind of the revolution of orchestration in the last few years hitting the identity market. You know, obviously orchestration's been around for quite a while when it comes to the business process, task automation, IT automation, and even in the SOARS space. But really excited about it hitting the identity plane and helping us overcome some of these challenges. So the goal is always better experiences, right? Better experiences for your users. And part of that, allowing you to optimize that customer journey to achieve those better experiences. You know, on the SIAM side, seeing more conversions, less drop-offs, more engagement, stronger security, and rapid iterations. You know, the ability to test different parts of your experience and to compare them and then to go all in on one or the other. And just to make identity easier. That all contributes to better experiences where we feel orchestration plays a great role in producing. So what is identity orchestration? This is a quote that we always use, which is a low-code, no-code, adaptive integration framework. It's really a framework that abstracts complexity from all of your integration points, all of your APIs. The ability, and to contribute to the ability to create cross-channel seamless experiences for mobile, for web, for whatever omni-channel sources that you need. Some of the three major areas that we see orchestration helping organizations. The first, and this is one of the core benefits of orchestration. The first is, with the complexity of integrations that I've outlined before, so many integrations, it's costly to work with, costly to integrate, costly to get developers to integrate. This is a stat by another orchestration vendor and MuleSoft. And it says custom integrations cost a company an average of $4.7 million a year. And that's because of the dev resources, the outsourcing costs, just in order to onboard these integrations and to utilize them. I'm sure some of you guys have similar stories in your organization. I see a few nodding heads, a few smiles in the audience already. So just being able to kind of abstract some of this and save money when it comes to plugging into integrations and not being worried about vendor lock-in. You've invested so much into that relationship with that vendor, and it gives you the ability to now feel that, if I want to add new vendors into the mix or replace them with other vendors, it's easy to do. The third is to move faster and get to that, that deployment of what your identity project. Again, this is from a MuleSoft and Deloitte study last year, where it said 52% of IT projects weren't delivered on time. Does that resonate with anyone? You guys get all your projects on time? This is a huge benefit of an orchestration tool, just because of the easy way to iterate and optimize and deploy. It really takes those projects from months and quarters to weeks, sometimes days, weeks of work. And I think there's a lot of folks that are attending here that can attest to some of this as well. Interesting enough, I ran into a customer at the event, and this wasn't a big factor for this particular customer because they were a dev shop. They're heavily invested in dev resources. They had them available, lucky them, and they always had the ability to quickly integrate into applications and to hard code things. But where they saw the value was abstracting code into configuration and getting away from relying on code, even though they had the developer resources, and the developer team bought into that whole idea of taking that code, putting it into configuration. And then just being an innovator. It's hard. Making changes in an existing authentication or registration or verification flow is difficult. It takes time, takes a lot of work. There's a lot of process that goes into it. And being able to be flexible and to be agile in today's world is huge when it comes to optimizing your experiences and being able to kind of innovate. I think that's one of the biggest things with orchestration is just the innovation that can come with it, because you can start to build additions to your experiences in such easier ways. So how do we do it specifically? And this is the only slide where you'll see a Ping plug in it. For us at Ping, this is a Ping-sponsored talk, we do it with a low-code, no-code tool called DaVinci. DaVinci is our orchestration tool. And it allows you to abstract the complexity of APIs into what we call connectors. And each one of these connectors have various capabilities, like find user or check password or enable MFA or whatever that may be. And the ability to drag these capabilities onto a canvas, kind of paint that canvas with your different capabilities, map the inputs and outputs so you can see visually the flow that you're trying to build and how a user would interact with it. And as I mentioned, because of that ease of use when it comes to dragging things, mapping things, you get the ability to really rapidly implement and optimize and test the user experience. I think you'll see in the demo there's a little play button there in the tool where you can just test it, see what you've built, make changes, test again, see what you built, and then when it comes to deploying it, gain some metrics from actual usage and optimize based on that. So it says, we've got this saying, if you can whiteboard it, you can build it. And it really is as simple as that. You can sit down with your business teams in your organization, and you can just start whiteboarding what you want to see in a journey. And oftentimes, what you whiteboard, like this, on a paper napkin or whatever it may be, can be translated into a flow on the canvas. Not always will it be as simple as this, because there's a lot of different custom requirements that you may have. But the best starting point is just to map it out, whiteboard it out, and then start to build it in the canvas.
And I think one of the points about the whiteboarding too is that it gets you a good starting point, but once you start kind of putting it together in DaVinci, and in doing that playing bit, you begin to say, oh, there's this step we forgot, okay? Or this step really is not needed. Because sometimes the whiteboard may oversimplify some things, but when you start, that starts as a starting point, and then you're building it out, and you get to play and interact with it, then you can see that, and the model of the whiteboard continues in the tool. Mm-hmm. So you're still effectively whiteboarding.
Yeah. Who here has played with any identity orchestration tools out there? Good amount. And who is this the first time you've kind of been exposed to identity orchestration? Okay. So it's really as easy as picking a use case. We have an integration directory attached to the Ping site. Oftentimes, orchestration companies out there would have the same system where they would have their own library of templates. I think at last count we have around 40 templates in the integration directory, and we've got a plan to triple that and more. You would find like a common one is Ping 1 sign-on with session management. And you can download that template and upload it into your DaVinci environment, and then you have a starting point of 10, 15 different capabilities in a flow that you can play and test and run through and then tweak based on your own specific use case. Then the interesting part where the power of orchestration really kicks in is some of the tooling that allows you to optimize and deploy. So an example would be native version control, where you have the ability to, whenever you save in your canvas, it'll save a new version. It will provide timestamps, a change log of what went into that version, the delta between the last save and this save, and also the ability to roll back any version or try a previous version without rolling it back and testing out that experience. So a lot of power there. A lot of power with what we call policies, orchestration policies. And orchestration policies is essentially rules around how to route traffic to your flow. So a good example of using this would be, I have two different flows. In this case, in the screenshot, I have Joey 101, Joey 201, two different flows that have two different experiences. And you can see there's a weighting column, which right now it's set at 50-50, where 50% of the traffic that runs through this policy will be directed to this top flow and 50% of the traffic to the bottom flow. So you can easily set up different A/B testing scenarios using that. And then you can key on specific nodes, like end nodes in that flow, and track user success in real time and be able to make a determination on, You know, if this is two different registration experiences, you know, do I see any difference in drop-off, or do I see any, you know, any difference in someone's experience based on what you're measuring? I mean, it all comes down to how you're measuring it in your flow and how you're building it out. And it allows you to rapidly optimize and make changes. 60% of organizations find A/B testing highly valuable for optimizing conversion rates. So a good feature for optimizing conversion rates. And then a huge, as I alluded in the very beginning, a huge part of a user experience comes down to the forms. And in orchestration platforms, typically, specifically those that are geared towards SIAM experiences, allow you to build forms within the tool. Within our DaVinci product, we have two ways. We have what I call the highly flexible custom approach, or the easy button approach. And you'll see the easy button approach in action because we just released that this last couple months. But on the previous slide, the highly customized approach is the ability for you, if you have developers or expertise, to actually play with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, open up one of these HTML nodes, enter in your HTML, your JavaScript, your CSS, hit save, hit that play button, and kind of render that experience that you want. And being able to, you know, provide really kind of customized branding, customized experiences. The easy approach, which we've just released, kind of combines a whole a whole number of components. And it's no-code form building is the core of it. So it kind of complements the no-low-code orchestration, where you build out your experiences. Now we offer the no-low-code or no-code drag-and-drop form builder, where you can create the layout of your forms, your sign-on forms, your registration forms, progressive profiling, with dragging custom buttons, radio buttons, checkboxes, drop-downs, custom text, and rich text icons, and then applying a theme and branding on top of it. So you can have the same form as I showed in the top of the session, the same form layout with two different brandings applied to it. And then on top of that, our language management capabilities allow you to really customize key value pairs for language management, and reference them within either the orchestration tool or within form building. So really excited about this and the power it gives you if you're interested in that easy button approach. I think a lot of customers have, a lot of companies out there have branding requirements that aren't super complex. It's really just, you know, what they want to see in the background, what they want to see in the headers, footers, the logos, the custom buttons, the coloring, and a few options around that. And when you have requirements that are that simple, this makes a lot of sense versus dealing with custom HTML and CSS. So without further ado, John, why don't you show the demo?
All right. So we're going to switch here. So I'm going to take two approaches on them. The first demo is going to be a video because I didn't think I wasn't, you know, hotel Wi-Fi's are always a potential challenge. Okay, here we go. So where did I put my video? Did I just minimize it? Yeah, I did. All right. I mean, so I didn't want to put you through the boring task of watching me type badly. So So what I did is I'm going to build out a registration flow. So kind of what he showed off at the beginning of this registration form, and I'm going to take an existing template from our library and use that as my starting point. Okay, as Nathan mentioned, the idea of the templates is to give you a starting point. I know generally the direction I want to go. I know the integrations I want to do. So I downloaded this particular template from our integration library. Okay. So basically showing here that I'm going through the process of downloading the integration. It's a JSON file that I can then go. I'm going to launch DaVinci and go into flows. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new flow. I'm going to basically create one. I have the option to do either a blank flow, start with a blank slate, or as I said, I'm going to import that JSON file, give it a name as to what I want to call it. And there. And so actually, let me kind of step back a bit. Right, whoop. Right there. Okay. So, basically this gives me a starting point. Everything, the blocks there, what I want to change is the registration process. So this registration process is what in the first demo was done, is that, ask the user email, name, and so forth. And then there is another form which is for the verification entry point. So there's two forms basically in here that are integrated. So that effectively, out of the box, what it's doing is that highly customizable, do whatever you want approach is what we have. We have these templates and that. I want to shift this to using the forms and leverage the ability that Nathan talked about with the forms of saying, for example, that I want to have language support, that I want to do themes and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead, and what I'm doing here is I'm going to try my flow, okay? So I'm going to do a try flow, so launch it. And so essentially to look at the UI, look at what's there, because I'm going to reproduce that form. So now I go into Ping 1 and I'm creating that new form, a new registration form, demo registration form. And I have some templates that I can use as a starting point for different types of forms. I'm going to use the registration. Now I'm going back here. So what I'm doing is I'm going back to that try flow and saying, okay, how is that user interaction going? So I purposely click submit to see where the error message is going, because on my form, okay, the top red there is where the error message is going to be. So the template I use already has a place for the error, and I want to leave it in the same place. I could move it around because now I can get into the drag and drop. The other thing I'm looking at is this example. This template is asking for a username and password, and has a password verification capability. But what I want is to have first name, last name, email. So there's going to be some differences. So this is not quite what I want, okay? I'm not going to have username, so I'm going to remove that password. I don't want to do that re-enter your password thing, so I've edited those two fields. So I removed one field that I didn't want to have in my new form, and I changed the password to only require once again. I hate those two type the passwords in twice dialogues. I think to me, that's old technology, okay? All right, so again, I'm re-looking at my form, and I need to add two new fields. So my idea is I'm going to actually add this, create a Ping 1 user. So I'm actually going to use the existing fields. I'm dragging those over and putting them where I want in the form. But I don't want the names of the defaults for those fields. I want to basically call a first name and so forth. So the other thing is I don't like the fact that we're only showing required and options. So I want to show both, that which ones are optional, which ones are required. So I changed the property of the form to show that. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to basically change the label. Okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set up a language variable, key value pair, so that I can support multiple languages. So I can use an existing one, so it gives me the ones that are essentially out of the box, or I can create my own. In this case, I'm going to create my own because I don't know exactly where these other ones are used, and some other applications may be using them, and I don't want to mess with those applications. So I'm going to create my own. So I create my own ID. So I'm going to create my own user key. And see, I had to retype that thing like 5 times to get it right. I cut that out of the video. Okay. Put in what I call a first name, select, and I'm going to do the same thing with the last name and so forth. Okay. And change to use the variables. Okay. So now I've saved my form. And what I'm going to do now, so I've created my form, I've saved my form, I've done the field labels. Now I need to essentially integrate that form into the DaVinci. So the existing one, remember, it's using that fully customizable. You have full control over the entire UI. That's what that HTTP connector is doing. I don't want to use that. I'm going to replace that connector. And so what I did is I right mouse click, and I'm showing you I'm doing a replace. And I'm going to add a new form. So my new ping1 form connector instead. Okay. I want to show a form, give my node a title, and pick the form. And there's my fields and that basically read from the form. Those are the fields that I defined on the form that essentially that I'm going to map into the application. And we'll come back to those there. And so now I've made my changes, applied my changes, and I'm going to close the dialog, and I'm going to go ahead and deploy and then try this flow. Basically, try the UI. Is it what I want? Okay? All right? So I've changed this as my form that I've created. Get the error message in the right place. I'm kind of doing a comparison. So now I'm going to test my language capability. So I'm changing the language in the browser to Portuguese. I was originally born in Portugal, although my Portuguese is very, very bad. And thank you, Google Translate, to help me translate. But the main point was to show you the language change. So I'm going to change languages here in the browser. Do a reload of the page, and okay, there we go. And it did reload, okay, and some of the fields changed, some of them did not. So like first name, last name didn't change. The password field did change, so some of it changed from our existing translations, but some did not. Okay. So this is what I'm going to do is, as I said, I use Google Translate to make sure I get it right. I didn't want to trust my bad spelling. And copy that. And so now I'm going into ping1, into the languages part of the application to essentially set the field for that language. Because I'm using, see, in my environments, I have English and Portuguese, and English is the default. So when I created that field, I was essentially creating it in the default. When I put in first name, it went into my default. Okay, but now I'm going to change it to Portuguese, and I'm going to know this is form field. So I'm going to grab DaVinci form field, so it shows me the ones in there, and I'm going to go find my custom ones that I've created. And you can see that there's nothing in there for those custom fields because I didn't put the language pack. You know, you can actually export these fields, and most when you do this in a real application, you're actually going to send that off to some third party to basically do the translations for you, because Google Translate is probably not the optimum option to do this. Okay. But for our demonstration purposes, it serves I need to move the cursor, so I did that, and I'm going to do the same thing with last name. And note the change essentially is immediate. Once I saved the fields for the name and did a refresh of the page, it reloaded, okay? And now you can see that the first name field does not say first name, and I also changed the last name. The only one I didn't change is email, because email is universal, right? Everybody calls it email. Okay? And so that was the language change. All right. So now I've got a new registration form. I'm going to enter the user's going to enter some information. My goal in this application is obviously to create a ping1 user using this information. In the existing template, the mappings for creating the user were actually pointing to essentially the node that I removed. They were referencing the node that I removed. And obviously, that node's not there anymore. Okay, I've got new fields. So I got to remap, okay, the fields to the essentially the new form. So I go in there, I'm removing all the existing ones, you know, and then I go in and use the variable and basically pick ping1 forms, shows me the fields, and I just simply click the ones I want in the appropriate area and go through and do, you know, given name, family name, password, and so forth. And so I finished that mapping, and now that will create the user. Now there is one more form that needs to be changed on here. I didn't tackle that one in this demo, but essentially I would need to effectively create a new form for the second step, which is after that create user, and I'd also need to do with the mappings to complete the changes. Okay? All right, so I need to deal, that's the other form I need to deal with, and of course I would need to deal with the mappings after that to complete this change. All right, now one of the things we also talked about was the idea of the branding, okay? Changing the branding. So I showed how to change the language, so what I'm going to do is deal with the brand. So let me actually launch DaVinci. Okay. I'm going to go to that flow. And this is live now, so no more recording, because I'm not going to be doing a lot of typing. And I'm going to deploy that. Okay. And my form loads. Okay, so this is the form you saw in the thing. So, and it's using the default branding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into branding and themes, and Nathan showed you in his brief demo at the beginning that, you know, he had those themes he'd created. So I'm actually going to go through the process of creating the theme. So I'm going to create a new theme. We provide some examples out of the box that you can use as starting points. Okay? So I'm going to use the mural one because I just thought this one looks cool. And I can now change the background images. I can change the text and so forth. I can add logos and so forth. By going into customize, allows me to essentially customize the color and all that. I'm just going to kind of take the defaults here. Whoops, my session timed out. Should have done a refresh. All right. So let me do that again. Customize it. Save it. Okay. And I'm going to change it, make that my active theme. I'm going to go back to my page and do a reload. And there's my new theme. Okay. Now, of course, you'd probably need to go a lot deeper into making changes. You know, the color scheme, the logos, and so forth. You know, and that was what they essentially did. Is he basically started as a starting point, grabbed some images, but you know, I don't want to take you through all that. And that's it. That's it for my demos. And I think we're done here, right?
For questions.
Yep. So any questions?
For the forms builder, are those form factor aware? So like do they render directly on mobile versus?
Yeah, they adjust on mobile or any resolution. Yeah. Underlying is they use React components as well that allow you to kind of render appropriately.
Huh?
Once you construct a simple or basic layout like this, then you want to go in and modify it. Does the no code JK
Sorry?
Do you have to abandon your code after you go and customize it?
Customize what?
It's more than what you can do inside your.
Are you talking about the themes or the forms?
I'm talking about the orchestration.
Yeah, I mean, essentially you have two options to that user experience. You can either use the forms and do the customizations and language support that as we've shown, and there's more to come, okay, in that aspect, or you basically build everything from scratch, you use your own. Yeah, so it's, it is effectively kind of a binary decision. It's one approach versus the other. So again, depending on your development resources and time frame. The forms can be put up, much great if you have the developers, CSS and JavaScript and HTML web developers. I mean, I've been a developer for years. I would never claim to be a web developer. I just don't get UIs. To me, green terminals were fine. They were fine. Okay, all this colored stuff just adds more complexity to it.
In both approaches, DaVinci is the tool that renders the form. So regardless of whether you're doing the no-code form building and applying the language and theme configuration, or whether you're using the HTML template or HTML node within DaVinci, in both cases, DaVinci is the one that kind of renders that in some sort of experience. So.
And you can mix them. So, I didn't change the second form, and maybe I didn't want to change the second form because maybe the second form had some special thing I wanted to do in UI that I can't do in form builder, okay? But the first one, so you're locked in from the perspective of, this particular form, I can use either form builder or I can build essentially from scratch. But I don't have to do forms for the entire experience. I can use, more customizable where it makes more sense. Use forms where it's a simpler user interaction. And I'm not worried too much about, getting too fancy with that.
And I didn't mention there is API support behind Form Builder as well. So you're able to, use CRUD API operations to retrieve, post, put, patch. Delete.
Any other questions? We'll take one back there first.
So have you done performance testing on these tools, and have you seen any concerns on it, or how will it be?
Yeah, so like every one of our features, they all go through performance testing. We have a number of customers in production right now with both, both types. So we're able to kind of get that and optimize. Where there does become performance concerns is when you add scripting to it, especially when you're adding some sort of risk profiling to your forms. Whether it's Ping or a third party, they all have some sort of script loader that you need to run as a profiling, and that's one area that you may find some concerns when it comes to performance.
Yes, regarding versioning within your workflow, where I work, change management is a big thing. And knowing the reasons why, let's say, workflow changed, and tying it to a particular version, usually comes with a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
How robust is versioning within this platform when it comes to answering questions of change management?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that may help with that. One is within the versions, it does produce a change list of what changes occurred, which is a good audit trail. But we also have auditing within the orchestration tool. So any changes that occur do get pushed to an audit kind of system that you can kind of monitor. Right now, that auditing doesn't get pushed to like a SIM streaming service via configuration, but that is part of what we're hoping to achieve soon, is to tie it in. Now we are able to tie in runtime events to webhook SIM streaming capabilities, just not audit yet.
And one thing on the versioning is you can label a specific version so you can go, because effectively, you save a change, it's a new version, and there is, and I've had several dialogues with Nathan about this and the ability to effectively be more proactive on the versions. We're trying, because I think we do need some advanced capabilities to them, and you can go in and label a particular version, and customers generally will do that when they get to the release one. So one of the things you do in the application policy, that's essentially what exposes it to your application, because you're not going to have your users do try-flow. Okay, that's not the way it's going to be deployed. Is that you would label the version that's going to be essentially production, and in the policy you can indicate specifically which version you want to use, and present that, and then you can actually in that flow with the production version continue making changes to it. You get, of course, new versions, but the application will continue to use the policy version that you set until you're ready to effectively upgrade that.
Yeah. And we've seen some use our APIs for version control, not necessarily leveraging the native version control. So that's an option as well, using Git or something. Yeah. So today it links to Ping1 and leverages a number of Ping1 services like forms, language, branding. It still appears as two different kind of distinct platforms. You log into Ping1 and then you go to DaVinci. But I think within 8 months or so, you'll see that converge into a single platform. So it doesn't feel like two different platforms.
Yeah, and I think we've gone over. No, yeah, okay, we said
Just
that.
one. Sorry, can you repeat? It depends on the requirements that you have around it. I'm not sure what kind of governance requirements you have.
What I meant was that when you created those decision page to workflow form, can we use that same, can we leverage those forms for access controlling in case if users wants to request some access?
Okay, I see. You could definitely build a workflow around that, and you can leverage those forms for the prompting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. I think.
Any other questions?
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for your time.
Oh, wait, we got one more.
Do you have any use case where you can walk us through or explain support for the microservice driven orchestration? So the use case is like a microservice wants to orchestrate call to other microservices.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more focused towards the back end, actually.
Yeah.
Like use case is like the second or third party.
So are you talking about I want to be able to use the orchestration more as an API call from my application?
Any policies, configurations, and all that.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that with that. I mean, we're very much kind of targeted in maybe to identity orchestration.
Yeah.
But we are looking, and you can do APIs where there's no user. And generally, it's tied to a user experience in the same way. So an example would be of pulling some information in that the application is going to leverage and maybe calling the user orchestration flow. For example, let's say I want to grab the user's IP address and figure out what country they're almost coming from, we think they're coming from, and so I can effectively have a call to a service that gets me that information, returns to the application, and then the application can do whatever it wants to do with that information. So it would be an API call. So it's still tied to a user experience. And then the next step, when now I want to interact with the user, I call a different flow that pops up and says, welcome, and displays what country they came from and asks them to verify that. We can pre-fill the form, for example, with that. So you can do that kind of thing of essentially it's more of an API call. But we look at it primarily from an identity perspective.
Yeah. There's 3 different integration methods. 2 of them are our core ones, which are user interactive kind of experiences. One is your typical redirect, OIDC SAML redirect to execute an authentication type experience. The second is a widget that you embed is an embedded app that you put into your application that allows you to render like components of your application with whatever the flow is doing, like it could be a registration, authentication, whatever type experience. And the third is a headless experience where there isn't like necessarily a user prompt. There's you feed it information, some headless like automation, reaching out to third parties, doing some verification without any prompts, and then pushing back the data to you to do outside of DaVinci.
I don't know who's the next speaker.
I think we're done. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
So
well, we're done. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.